So what's the biggest question people ask these days? How to manifest wealth.
That's unexpected. I must say, you fight well.
Now put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Good morning, this is Lucky Lynx. This is probably the biggest question I get, aside from how to get love in your life, is that how do you make wealth? How do you do what you love? How do you make a living doing what you love, or get money? Or, there's 50,000 different ways people ask that question, but it's the same basic thing. This whole manifesting thing that's out there right now, I gotta tell you, the way that people talk about it, doing magic, doing manifestation, all this stuff, there's some things that are really important that people are missing. Really, really important. Now, I'm going to tell you, I followed that advice when I was a kid: do what you love and the money will follow. And I've talked about this in some other videos. Well, I was a starving college professor at that point, and what I realized, I think, while I was trying to struggle to get groceries, while I was teaching writing courses, was maybe this really wasn't what I loved, and maybe I didn't have all the answers in that, and maybe that particular statement was incomplete. It was probably all of the above. I wasn't supposed to be in that system. I realized that later, because it was an extremely dysfunctional system, one that I think hobbles people rather than empowers them. There's some other things I think that are really important too. I do know that once I walked away and started doing hypnosis and started doing readings, which really I found much more, I think, to my personality and to my core than it was doing teaching in a university. There was still some things that I struggled with, and there was still some problems that I had. It was sporadic, and at the time there were all these edicts to creatively visualize the money coming to you, things that sounded a lot like The Secret. And then there was magic, and you could do magic for money, and then it would come, and then suddenly you'd find, or at least I did from my own experience, because everything I'm telling you is from my own experience, because that's the experience that I have. Maybe and hopefully this can help you guys figure some things out, because it's the one question that people keep asking me over and over again, and I think it's the one thing that they got the wrong view about. They think about it wrong, they view it wrong, they feel about it wrong, and that's what stands in their way. I noticed that if you did magic for money, you probably would get a big windfall, and then suddenly things would get sporadic or it get weird. There's a reason for that. And I'm going to tell you, because I see this happening with clients all the time. They'll get involved with a group that do magic for money, or they do some kind of invocation for money. I don't care what you call it. You call it that secret stuff. You can do the same thing. It's still magic. Magic is magic. You're sitting in a church and you're asking God to intercede for you. It's still the same stuff. You're asking someone to bring this to you. There's a payment for that. And what happens is people get some, and then it runs out. Then they got to ask again. Then they got to ask again. And then they got to ask again. And there's a reason why they got to keep asking. Because the thing at their core that actually can help them to generate it themselves, by having the right view about wealth, and by being in the right livelihood, and by engaging in the right endeavors and the right speech, and a few other rights, those things are off, and so it can't really come to them. So what happens is they do magic for, or they invoke it, or they ask it, and then it comes, but then it wears out. Why? Because the contract that they made is up, and they keep trying to make contracts, and different spirits tend to try to keep helping them make the contract for whatever, or they don't keep their word or whatever. I talk about this all the time, contract magic all the time, and spirit contracts all the time. So I'm not going to go through all that again, because I got a bunch of videos on that. But what happens is it starts to wear thin. There's only so many contracts that you can make. Now, when I was a kid, everyone in my family wanted me to be something very specific that was completely opposite of what I really was. As a matter of fact, I think everything they wanted for me had nothing to do with who I really was, and they didn't really even bother asking themselves, hey, what is he really good at? What is this? Because this kind of stuff just made them uncomfortable. They never in a million years would have considered me doing this. But it really wasn't until I met my master that I made a huge breakthrough about what it meant, what wealth even meant. And I think that I once asked him, what is wealth? And he said, the ability to get what you need when you need it, which was a pretty simple and straightforward definition. Not having piles of it that you sit on top and you hoard like the dragon in The Hobbit, because that's what most people think wealth is. How can I hoard it? How can I hold it? If I got a big enough pile of it, I'll never worry again. Well, that's really not true, because the people in the world who are acting like that, they've stolen it. They've grabbed it. They've hoarded it from everyone. I've been doing, when I started looking into marketing and stuff like that to understand how to reach people better, the one thing I started seeing over and over again was some people who had some pretty good ideas, but there are a lot of people out there who are really insincere. They claim to be wanting to be helping people, and I watch what they do, and I watch how they go about their business, and they're taking an awful lot from people. And everything that looks like they're giving it away is some kind of something to hook people. And when I started doing these videos, my first thought was, well, maybe I'll show them how to do a crystal ball, and maybe I'll be able to reach people. Maybe they'll know about me. Maybe then they'll want to get some readings. It was kind of that simple. But I see how people are doing business these days, grabbing and grabbing. It's like, I need more. I got to show you my car. I got to show you my house. I got to show you my other house. And it's just like, how much do you possibly need? And who owns what? Does the stuff own you, or do you own the stuff? Well, with that idea in mind, wealth is being able to get what you need when you need it. It changed my view of things. But this is really where it got a little weird. I spent a good bit of my youth hanging out in cemeteries, because back in Chicago where I grew up, there weren't really any parks. Nature was kind of slim, but I had cemeteries everywhere. I spent a lot of time in cemeteries, and the strangest thing happened when I was trying to sort of break through and make a better living for myself than what I'd made as a teacher, and I felt kind of stuck. And like I said, back in Chicago, social media was starting to get a little more, but it was still kind of hit or miss with, finding people to get for readings, especially in the Midwest, where they don't look too kindly on this. But Twitter had just started, and Facebook had started, and there was MySpace, and my master suggested that I take a camera and then I go into a graveyard and I film what I saw. And I kept saying, how is that going to help me make a living? And he said, take a camera, go in the graveyard, and film what you see. Now, I was really passionate about the graveyards back there, because I think I told you guys before, especially in my podcast. And by the way, for those of you who don't know, I started a podcast. I'll put the link below. I really liked and wanted to be someone who solved spooky mysteries when I was a kid. That was like my biggest. I wanted to be like Scooby-Doo, or I wanted to be like the Hardy Boys and actually solve these really spooky mysteries. And it's kind of what you do when you do this. You're kind of a detective, and you're kind of interacting with the spirit world, so this is a lot closer. But he told me, take a camera, go in a graveyard, and show people what's there. And there were a lot of spooky stories that I knew and remembered, and a lot of experiences that I'd had in those cemeteries, and I thought, well, why don't I start taking people there? But I kept worrying. I kept worrying about, I had a problem with my car. I couldn't use my car because my car had to, with the person I was with, had to take the car out of town, and I had no car. There was problems with my mortgage. There was problems with all these things, and I kept worrying, and I kept wondering, and I kept going, oh my God, how am I going to do this? I need a job. I need this. And he kept saying, take a camera, go in a graveyard, and film what you see. The weirdest thing happened. I decided I was going to do it. I went in a graveyard. I started filming one, and I did my first video, and I put it up on YouTube. And I said, well, I did it, but I don't know what it's going to do. He goes, good. Now keep doing it. Keep showing people what you know. Keep showing people what you do. What I didn't understand was he was starting to teach me a Tibetan process on how they built the Silk Road. It's called the Kingdom Map. And he started to teach me this very valuable process about how one builds wealth. And it was a very simple thing that he had me do because he wanted me to succeed step by step by step. And I kept worrying. What am I going to do? I got no wheels. My mortgage is going to, all this stuff. And I worried. Well, the car disappeared. I had no car. I couldn't even go to graveyards. And the weirdest thing happened. a friend of mine gave me a Harley. Gave me a Harley. So I spent most of my time riding around on that Harley, going to graveyards and filming and taking pictures of what I did. And then it occurred to me that maybe I should write a book about it. Since I'd had all this experience in teaching writing and I'd always wanted to write books, why not do a book on Chicago graveyards? So I started working on the book. And then some weird things started happening. Money started coming in from strange places. It just started coming in. Now, I'm not saying that that's always the way it works, but I do know that I was working on my Tibetan practice. I was listening to my master. I was starting to do what I loved, and I was starting to not worry about how it was going to work as a job. And next thing you knew, I had a book. And all of a sudden, this project turned into something that taught me so many things. It taught me how to meet people, and it taught me how to interact with them and learn from them. I actually made a friend of a mortician in a local funeral home who became the final chapter of the book. He let me interview him about what it was like to work in that particular industry, and he taught me so much about life. I was in this graveyard thinking it was going to be about spooky things, and in the end it turned into a motivational thing. When I was looking around at these graves, I kept thinking, why, when we all end up in this grave, when we all end up in the same ground together, why do we let fear stop us, and why do we worry about stupid things like what job am I going to have, and how are people going to perceive me? That became the foundation for the book and for the videos. Now, I made some mistakes. It wasn't the greatest thing in the world, but who cares? I did it. I had this book and I sold copies. And then I learned how to market it to local bookstores. And you know what? I struggled with that. People were interested in the idea. They didn't like the idea, but it didn't matter. I published the book anyway. I sold it on my own. I went to festivals and things, and people saw the book. They bought the book. I sold out. I learned so many things from not worrying about what job to have. And all because my master kept saying, practice the Dharma. That was first. So I practiced the Dharma. And it just so happened that one of the Dharma practices actually happened in the cemetery. So it was easy to combine the two. It told me to do what I love, to take a camera and to show people these things. And I got to experience very interesting things in relation to the spirit world. And I learned some of the things that I now teach people when they ask me about what goes on with spirits and contracts and things like that. I made some interesting friends who were in the paranormal stuff, who talked to me online. I learned how to use social media. I learned how to use a camera. I learned how to be on camera and be comfortable with it and not worry. I learned that you could make a mistake and it didn't matter. You could fix that mistake. I learned so many things, and he knew I was going to learn all these things, and he pushed me into it. But the one thing I had to do was I had to take that first step. I had to stop worrying about what job I was going to have. And then I had to get on that Harley. I had to take those pictures, I had to shoot those videos, and I'd write that book and not worry where the money was going to come from. And somehow, the Dharma, my master, my practice, doing these things that I loved and sharing them with other people took care of me. And then, a few years later, after all of that stuff that had been holding me back with the mortgage and the car and the person that I was with at the time that were all kind of like weighing down on me, started to unravel. And I found myself getting free from all of it. And it was actually my master and my partner who suggested that I take this a little bigger. And one day I decided, I'm just going to do this video on a crystal ball, and I'm going to share what I know from people. Now, here's the weird thing. Everything I learned from doing all of that stuff in the graveyard and with the camera and taking pictures and writing and all that stuff all started to come together when I did this. And then I really had something valuable to share with people. I could say, hey, this is the road I went down, and these are the mistakes I made, and this is how you can do it without making those mistakes too. Then I started to learn what I think those marketing gurus are trying to show people. That if you share with people and you share them something value, they like it. But I think so many of those guys are so insincere that you can tell. But when I do this, I love it. I love talking about the spirit world. I love showing people how to do this stuff. I love it. And I loved riding around on that Harley, and I loved taking those pictures, and I loved meeting those people in those cemeteries who told me some of the stories that happened in the cemetery. Now I'm going to tell you one of those stories right now because it made me shiver. when I learned it. There was a woman who was working at Graceland Cemetery in Chicago. Now, it's one of the most famous cemeteries in the world. It is super haunted, and there's so many ghost stories there, I can't even count them all. So I asked one of the women who worked there if I could interview her for the book, and she said sure. And I asked her, what is the most unusual thing you've seen while working in this cemetery? And she said, most people would think I'd say ghosts or spirits or something like that, but that's not it. The most unusual thing, the most weird thing that I've seen is how many people die alone. All the people in the world. And these people don't have a family, they don't have friends, they die alone. They're buried alone. No one ever comes to the grave. No one ever comes to visit. Of all the lessons that I learned from that about what wealth really is and about how to get on track with who you really are, and how when you get on track with who you really are and you start to view wealth in a new light, you start to ask yourself, what is wealth? You start to ask yourself, how do you really manifest, as they all like to say, what it is? Out of all the lessons I learned about writing books, and the big one, which was I had been spending time in cemeteries because I was afraid to live, and I was afraid of the living, and I had to change that one. The one that still shakes me up and makes me go, wow, was that one. So many people die alone. Billions of people in this world, so many people die alone. And I thought, in Bonn, we take refuge in three things. The Buddha, who is our teacher. The Dharma, which is the teaching, which takes care of us if we do it. And the Sangha, which is the group of people who practice with us. And I think, wow, so many people in the world, they have nothing to take refuge in. They're just alone. And that was really a lesson to learn. So, when I see these lessons about manifesting and praying and all this stuff, it's just another contract magic piece that I see. But I know this. When you start to really get in line with who you really are, things start to open up. Connections start to be made. Things start to loosen up. Things start to happen. The limitations and the obstacles that you had start to free up. I'm telling you, it was the most interesting thing in the world when my friend gave me a Harley when I had no wheels. And he didn't even think twice about it. He's like, keep it. When people tell me magic doesn't exist, I laugh. When people think they got it all figured out because they get some job, I laugh. When people think that the answer is in the place that you live, the kind of house that you have, the job, the superficial stuff, I laugh. I remember that woman who said, the weirdest thing about working here is how many people die alone. Because it made me think, do people really know what wealth is? Do they really ever live the life that they want to live, that they need to live, that is in line with who they really are? Do they ever start to view the world and its possibilities in an incredible, amazing, beautiful light? And how many people die without ever understanding that there is really such a thing as magic? And the potentials of it are unbelievable. I'm Lucky Lynx, as always, wishing you success, wealth, and good fortune in all that you do. If you would like to get a reading from me, 779-302-8009 or conjurehope@gmail.com. And if you'd like to take a class on how to read the playing cards, how to read the tarot, how to read a crystal ball, how to read Mexican Loteria, look at this, I got my own little Mexican Loteria bag for it too. Or how to read Lenormand Basic or Lenormand Grand Tableau. I've got a class in each one of them. Contact me 779-302-8009 or conjurehope@gmail.com. Hey, if you would like to connect with my master, Padma Rinpoche, the one who encouraged me to do this, and to start down this road of being who I really was, authentic to who I really was, and really understanding and experiencing what wealth is, hit me up on Facebook, or you can find him on Facebook, Padma Rinpoche. I'm going to be interviewing him tomorrow, at 1 o'clock Pacific time, and I'm going to be interviewing him about the retreat that's coming up here in August. There is a Tibetan Bond retreat we're having here in nature in August. He is having the retreat, and he's going to be doing 3 main empowerments. And by the way, these 3 empowerments were 3 of the things that helped me get through the blocks that were standing in the way of me actually finding myself standing in that cemetery with a brand new Harley, my camera, telling spooky stories and watching my luck and my passion change. He's going to be giving he's going to be giving 3 of those empowerments at this retreat for 1 week. If you want to know more about it, I'm going to be interviewing him at Facebook Live. I'm going to put the link to that in the thing here below too. And if you want to click on it and then hit going, and then you'll see it when it comes up tomorrow. And then if you want more information on the retreat, I can send you that too. If you want to connect with him, like I said, Padma Gampo Rinpoche. And for those of you who've donated, wow, thank you so much for your donations. And if you like these videos and you want to continue to see them coming, and you want to help to see them coming by donating, please, I will put my PayPal and my Venmo below for you. Wealth. It's an interesting subject. It has a lot of aspects, and it is so easily misunderstood. And how people go about it is so confusing and so